Well, my name is Dick Dolezal, and in real life, I'm a social worker with St. Louis County. I work in their chemical health unit. And just today, I turned in my resignation paper, my retirement, not resignation, retirement. Boy, say that carefully here. And so I've been there about 32 years and will be leaving there end of April. So big things for me. But 6 years ago, in the spring of 2000, I read Heidi's article in the Ripsaw, and that was the first time I had ever heard of these gentlemen and the lynchings. And I'm not a native Duluthian. I grew up in Minneapolis, but even in Minnesota history teachings and things like that, I don't recall hearing of it, and so I was pretty astounded to hear of it. And decided that June 15th to go to some people at my office were saying there's going to be a memorial and at the corner where they were lynched, and so I thought I would go. And I went home and had dinner and then headed down thinking they're trying to have people there all the time, and it was a rainy evening if I recall. And if you know that corner, it was even worse 6 years ago, in that the memorial has kind of actually brought it up a fair amount, and it's the way it looks there. That corner was across from where I was standing was just an abandoned lot that people were parking in, and pretty rundown looking thing, uneven site from buildings that had been there apparently and were gone now and things like that. But I remember standing across from on the corner in the rain there, and across from me was the Cozy Bar and then the Cozy Apartments, which are just above there. Well renowned for prostitution and drug dealing. And I happened to be the only one standing there at that time, and just felt like, I think I'd rather go home. This isn't very comfortable for me. And I thought about what I had read about and how right there where I was standing, 80-some years ago, people have been lynched, and decided that I could stay. And then other people showed up, and people we were talking about, maybe we could put a plaque on the wall here, some way to recognize us. How can we get something in the cement of the sidewalk there? Is there some way we could generate some information about this and some recognition for this event happening here? And then, so somebody agreed to call a meeting, and I think we must have shared phone numbers. I can't quite remember how that got out, but eventually Heidi, Heidi was a prime mover here, Henry Banks, they sort of were our leaders right at the very beginning there, and called a meeting, and people started coming. And we'd have anywhere from a dozen to, I think our largest, we might have had over 40 people come to it, and talk about this. So and as I say, it all started with Heidi's article. For me, it turns out, and maybe Heidi shared this, people have been doing things for some time trying to get some recognition. But for me, it started back then. As we met, there were two things I think about us that were unique. It was a grassroots thing, and so that's not necessarily unique, but it meant that we had all of those. All right, who's in charge here, and how do we get a direction going? Because when it's really just a bunch of people getting together, one meeting it might be going this way, and the next meeting some other people come in, and so we start going this way. The first year was a frustrating year. We were also quite a racial mix of people who were getting together. None of us represented. I mean, I was just there as myself. I wasn't there as a social worker, any of those kinds of things. I was just interested in this. And that's how everyone came to it. It took me quite a while to find out what people even did when they weren't meeting together. The second thing was, you couldn't, we learned to say you can't have a vote in where we're going with this unless you're coming to meetings. Just because of that frustration of people coming in every 3 months and saying, no, this is what you should be doing. And so nobody was guaranteed a spot in this group of people. You had to come and you had to be there and participate. So, we didn't have, the NAACP didn't have a spot. The St. Louis County Human Services didn't have a spot. Nobody had a place. You wanted to be involved in this, you needed to come. We also didn't recognize people necessarily as where they were from. As I said, I didn't know where necessarily people even worked. We had something we wanted to do. I think fairly early on we started talking about these three issues, reconciliation, respect, and atonement, okay, that really defined us over the years. As we would have growing pains and be fighting amongst ourselves, as most groups do, it would help us to remember that what we're about and what we're trying to bring into this community is some reconciliation. And we need to figure out how to work together. That was a big challenge. I think I was fairly quiet my first year. I think I started on the committee seeing this as, in some ways, a black issue. The community needed to recognize this lynching, but it really was a black issue. And so I was pretty content to be supportive and listen to particularly the black members of the committee and sort of defer. Well, if I didn't necessarily think that was a good idea, who was I? And white men are always talking and leading the way, so I'm just going to be quiet. One thing. Part of my growth process in terms of my sense of race relations and was realizing that was really a bit of a prejudicial thing I was doing by deferring and thinking it was a black issue. I came to see that it's a community issue, and in this community that makes it a mostly white issue. That what was necessary was for the perpetrators of the crime, who were white people, and their descendants, to recognize it, and it was for our growth that we needed to do this, which was a big switch for me from where I started. Somehow this was going to be good for the black people to do this, not realizing that it really was me and my fellow Caucasians who needed this, and for whom it was really going to benefit. The second part was I realized I was really, by my deferring, I wasn't treating my black compatriots as equals. That's kind of arrogant on my part, that I thought maybe we should go differently, but I wasn't going to say anything. And I realized that no, I had to get in and fight for where I thought this ought to go, because it was important to me, and that the people on the committee would listen to me and could listen to me, and we just have to negotiate these things. That I had every right to be there and set a direction as anybody else in the room. And I've continued to grow in my sense of how people get along, of recognizing people for their character and not their color, and yet recognizing color, because color is important. I mean, it's a part of who we are. So it's been a real time of continued growth for me. And I'm going to be 59 next month, so it keeps happening. I've learned that we're not done growing. Or at least I don't want to be done growing. I want to keep learning. So, okay, we decided we're going to do a monument, because we learned that the area across from the lynching corner was available, that vacant lot I was telling you about. And so we began looking into that. And I don't think, as I understand what I'm doing here today is to talk about that process of the memorial getting built. I wanted to start though with a little bit of my process and what happened to me as I got into this. So having said that, and this is probably a year later now, we're in 2001, we've continued to meet at least monthly. We have co-chairs, and we are agreeing that we think we could put up a memorial at this site. We started negotiating with the mayor, who was Gary Doty, who of course at first said, why do I want to back something like this? 80 years old and we want to bring this up? How is this good for Duluth? As we talked with him about sort of what I was saying, it's good healing for the community, and that our community needs to work this thing through to bring it out into the open so that people can talk about it. Because it was something that was talked about, but not out in the open. It was something that the communities of color certainly were aware of. Anyway, the mayor got behind it and helped us. I think he swung us a $60,000 loan, as we talked about what we were going to do. So we had to then, okay, so if we're going to build this, how are we going to do it? And we broke up into two major committees. One was who's going to build this, and how are we going to get one? And I was on that committee. And for that, we started meeting with the Duluth Public Arts Commission, who taught us lots. 6 of us joined this subcommittee, and taught us a lot about public art, for one thing. You're going to put something up. What kind of materials are you going to use? Are you aware that it should outlive you and be around for a long time? So what's it going to say? It's very important. You're not just slap something up. So they taught us some of those things, and that was very helpful. We put together a request for proposals, an RFP. They helped us with a mailing that we sent out to arts organizations. And we had to pick a figure. How much was this going to cost? And this was really out of the blue. we were clueless about this. We picked $150,000. It sounded like a good amount of money, and we ought to be able to build something with that kind of money. So in our request for proposals, we said that we needed someone to come and to build it here and to do it for a total of $150,000. And 17 proposals came in to us. We met with the Duluth Public Arts Council again, and they helped us whittle down those 17 to 6. We took it to the board, the whole committee of a whole, and got down to 3. And then we invited those 3 sets of artists to come here. And I think we paid them like $500 or something like that to come and present to us. And we picked the one by Carla Stetson and Anthony Porter. It was, I liked the combination, which is the one that's up there. There were some other really good ones. I think any of those last 3 probably would have been nice, but I like this one. I like the combination of the visual and the quotes. It fits on my way of learning, so I liked it. I thought it would be good, and I was on the committee, so I helped to get it here. So then we selected them. They agreed to do it, and that we could do it within about a year's time frame. And now I have to say something about those 2 artists. Remember I told you we were a grassroots organization, and the mayor was talking about loaning us $60,000. He'd also talked actually about paying for the whole thing. But we really, as a group, we were not a legal entity of any sort. And we had no money. And yet we talked to these 2 and said, would you like to do it? And they agreed to do it. And they just believed in us. Or were willing to take the risk that they were going to, contract with companies and come up with bills that we should be paid by someone. And they really, I mean, they couldn't sue us. We didn't even exist. And so the artists were really putting themselves on the line here, and they did. They were wonderful, just wonderful. Okay, so we started working then. We decided we needed another committee, and I mentioned two committees, and that was the fundraising. So we had to get busy and raise money. Now, Anthony Porter actually lived in the Twin Cities at the time, and he was the man who did the quotes. He was a writer and stuff like that, and so he worked on that. Carla was the artist who designed well, the walls, and she's a sculptor, and so she did those workings of the men. So she was working on that stuff, contracting with a company down in New Ulm to build the walls, contracting with a place in a bronzing place, whatever, down in Osceola, Wisconsin, who would take the wax figurines and make them into bronze that are up on the wall there.